Hey there, and welcome back to another session of my SwiftUI course. Today we're going to learn how to create this content right here in the home screen. And we're going to learn how to create the scroll view so that we can scroll horizontally, but you can use the same technique for vertical scrolling as well. We're also going to learn how to create a contextual shadow, as I call it. Some people call it a glow, but essentially when you have a really strong color on an element, that color can be spread on the ground, just like in real life. Because we live in digital world, sometimes we deal with screens, with digital items that have very strong colors. So let's go back to our Xcode project. And here we are on the home screen where we left off. And instead of building on top of this file, which is getting bigger and bigger, we're gonna create a new screen. And since we can summon just any screen, we're gonna do the same for the home, and we're gonna use the home as sort of like a hub to connect everything together. So let's open our navigator and then let's create a new screen, a new component. I'm gonna click on new file, and then next I'm going to name this home list and then create. So now I'm going to disable the left navigator and then resume. Let's start with the text. We're gonna put build an app, and then we're gonna add some modifiers, starting with the font. It's going to be title, so that's fine. And then the weight, it's going to be bold. Now let's bring an image. I'm going to summon the images and set it to illustration 1 and just drag it right here. It's going to create a VStack, and then I have my text and my image. Let's just indent this, Control I, and we're good. Before we arrange the padding and the spacing, we're gonna set the background for the card. So on the VStack, I'm gonna go to background in the modifiers, and I'm gonna set to a color in my style guide. So parentheses, we're gonna set background 3. Then let's set the corner radius. I'm gonna set to 30. The frame, we'll set it to 246 and then 360. So the content is always taking the minimal space unless you add the spacer. So let's do that. I'm going to add a spacer right between the text and the image. So I'm gonna go here and add a spacer. So now it's gonna take the whole height. Let me just add a bit of text so that I can have multi-line. So with SwiftUI, and then I'm gonna set it to a color white. So text color, it's going to be white. And I'm gonna set the padding to 20. I want my text to be multi-line, so I'm gonna use the modifier line limit. And let's set it to, let's say 4. I can also limit the size of my card, especially the width. Let's say you have a card that becomes way larger, then the text is not gonna be weird. It's gonna stay the same width. So what I'm gonna do is set the frame and remove the height. I don't really need the height here. I'm gonna set it to 150. Cool, it's starting to look good. I just need to align my text to the left. So I'm gonna go to the VStack, inspect it, and then set the alignment to the left. All right, so now let's deal with the drop shadow, specifically a contextual drop shadow. In this case, we have two ways to deal with that. The first way is directly to the style guide, so we're gonna go there later. And then the second way is to simply get the hex color value and then set the opacity for that color. So I'm gonna set the shadow first. The shadow by default is only with radius, so I'm gonna delete the radius and restart it. So now I can have a bunch more values. So we have the color, we have the radius, which I'm gonna put 20, 0 for X, and then 20 for Y. For the color, I'm gonna set it to black for now. Obviously, you should never use a black drop shadow like this, unless you're on a black background, which cancel the drop shadow. But anyways, I'm gonna click on the shadow right here and go to inspect. Once I have a default color, now I can select it. And in this case, I can go to custom. When you select the custom, you're gonna have to click it again because you're not gonna see the color picker at first. And once you have that, I can just go to the 60-bit hex and paste the hex color and then set the opacity from here. And in my case, I'm gonna set it to 0.3 and voila. Now the problem is it creates this very long code, and that's why I tend to prefer using the style guide, which also is better because then you can customize the style guide later separately from the code, and it's a lot more efficient even for dark mode. So let's go ahead and do that. We're gonna switch to the assets and we're gonna build two cards, and these are the two background colors. So what I'm gonna do is simply copy and paste to create a copy, and here I'm gonna put background shadow 3, and for this one as well, so background shadow 4, and then I'm gonna bring the inspector from the right, go to the attribute inspector and make sure to select this. So now I can just set the opacity from here to, let's say, 30%, and I'm gonna do the same for the other one, 30% at the very bottom. If you want to change the color, you can also just go to hex on the third option and then change the code right here. But here we're fine, so I'm gonna put these two into the colors folder and I'm gonna start using that in code. So going to this breadcrumb menu, I'm gonna go back to home list like this and just resume and disable the inspector. So now I can just summon my color. Make sure that you know exactly where to start and where to end. As you can see, when you click on the parentheses, you can see where it starts and where it ends. So we're gonna have to delete all of that in between and then put double quotes and then set the name of the background color for the shadow. So it's gonna be background shadow 3. And so we have exactly the same result. Okay, so now that we have our card, we can create a component, but not before we have a parent container. Otherwise, it's not gonna let us extract subview. So we're gonna have to put this VStack, so command click, in an H stack because it's going to be horizontal in terms of stack. And then selecting the VStack again, I'm going to extract subview. Then I'm going to name it course view. Since we're starting to have more and more views in our app, we have to be more and more explicit. We used card view before, so we cannot use card view again. Since this is about a course, that's why I'm naming it course view. Here, let's create a bunch of cards so that we have enough to scroll. So I'm going to command click this course view, and there's an option that's really neat. It's called repeat. It's simply going to create a number of these items up to 5 by default, but I can set it to 3 if I want to. Like this, I don't have to copy and paste and do it manually. And then later I can just replace this with data. I really like the ability to embed stuff because it saves the trouble of having to copy and paste later after you create the curly braces. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to embed this in group sort of like as a placeholder. And I'm going to simply replace this with a scroll view, type like this. So now I have my scroll view. Let's preview this, and voila, we have our beautiful scroll, and we didn't have to do much at all. But if you scroll a little bit, you're gonna see that there's an indicator. And sometimes, especially for horizontal scrolling, you don't really need that to show. So there's an option for scroll view that allows you to hide it, and it's very simple. So I'm gonna put parentheses right here, and then I'm gonna type shows horizontal indicator. Unfortunately, I can't use the auto completion, because if I do that, then I have access to all of the options, and that can be a bit cumbersome. In this case, I just want this one, shows horizontal indicator. I'm gonna put that to false. So now when you scroll, you can see that there's no more a scroll bar at the bottom. And this is useful when you have this UI where you have a bunch of horizontal cards and you don't want to see the scroll bar. Alright, so that's it for now for the scroll view. In the next section, I want to show you how to set up the rest of the layout. We're gonna add data for each of them, and then I'm gonna show you how to make these cards tappable so that they can call another screen inside a modal. So I'll see you in the next section.